I wonder, since the assessed value of that plot, that 5.5 acres, is, I think, $325,000, could we maybe make some sort of arrangement with the seller, since he's raising this money for charity? Would he be willing for some sort of consideration with the town for the part of the lot that we don't have any chance to save, to get a better price, to save a bunch of it that then could be used for a cemetery that would literally put us on the map nationally as saying, look, we have a green burial cemetery here in Newbury that we can make available to Newbury residents, Newburyport residents, Essex County residents, whatever we would want to do, and we would actually still be able to make some money on it, and we can keep it looking pretty much the way it does now, maybe nicer with a meadow instead of the agricultural field that's been fallow now for 2 seasons, but would allow the wildlife that is all over that field every single day, and there's nobody on Cottage Road who can't tell you stories of what we see there, you know, including woodcock who breed there every spring, which is kind of a big deal for the birders around here. They come and see that. I do think there's a way for us to do this and not have it be, oh, the town's just buying another piece of empty land because people don't want to have houses on it. I really do think it would be a good location to extend the cemetery. And since there's already dead people on either side of it, I think it's worth it. And so, no, we couldn't charge $9,000 like they do in Cambridge, but, you know, over time, I think it would be of value for the town, not only as value for the neighborhood because it's a beautiful natural area, but as a place to do. I guarantee you everybody in Newbury is going to die. I guarantee you that. And they're going to need a place to put those bodies. So that, I wanted to make that pitch. And okay, 1.6 million, I agree with you, there's no way we could possibly justify that. But could they make an arrangement with us to make this whole thing less traumatic for everybody involved? I just wonder if the sellers would be willing to negotiate that. So that they get something they want. They'll still get some money, they just maybe won't get the ridiculous amount of money that they're asking for, is my bit. So, it's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Come on up.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Seabury Ward, 12 Riverfront, and I didn't expect to get up here and say, oh, what a wonderful idea the former speaker is, because we've just come back from Mass General today, and as many trips as we make, we are in our 80s, and we do know that there will be a place for us to need to be part of this earth as part of the earth. I think that's quite an amazing idea. I would have spoken about neighborhood change and the loss of what brought us to live on the river, which we're very fortunate. And I want other people to be able to have that same fortunateness when we pass, which will be at some point. And I just would hope that the things that brought people here in the early days, the way will be found to have a place for people to really have community. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Come on up, Bill.
My name's Don Jarvis, I live at Highfield Road. I love the idea of the cemetery piece. As you may know, and as folks may know, I do a lot of work and have done a lot of work in the cemeteries here in town. And we only have 2 active cemeteries, which are filling up pretty quickly here in town. It's Thomas Parker and Evergreen. And Evergreen, from what the last I know, when they do a funeral, it's all based around the tide. Because the tide directly influences the land there underneath. So that's something to be considered about. But we do have a need for cemetery space. Many years ago, when I was appointed by the board to oversee the veteran graves here in town, a dream of mine was always to have a veteran cemetery here in town. And I'm not saying that this could be all veteran cemetery, But I think the need of cemetery space in Newbury is definitely something we should be talking about. Evergreen is gonna fill up before I die, before most of us die, and Thomas Parker is not far behind it. There is no other active cemetery here in town. So as she highlighted, we do have 8,000 residents here in town, and it will grow. And we do need a place to put these folks when the time comes. And not everybody's going to be cremated. We do got to consider full caskets. So I do love the idea of working with the seller on making it cemetery property.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Would anyone else like to offer public comment? Come on up, sir.
John Protopapa, 64 Cottage Road. Like my neighbors, and I don't think you'd find anyone on Cottage Road that would want to see this development go forward. The fact that the town finds no historical significance to that is a little disconcerting when you figure that the end of Cottage Road is where the town started. That household has been there in the family generations. The sale they had across the street was spectacular. To change Cottage Road in that area forever would be a sin. Every time someone drives down there, you'd be like, something's not right here. As soon as you get past those houses into what is Cottage Road now, it would be so dramatically different that, again, it would stand out like a sore thumb. And it would just change a precious part of Newbury that's always been that way since the original founders, and we'd never be able to get it back. So I think it's something that hopefully we can come up with a compromise, and the seller can be a little bit more forgiving on the price, and maybe the cemetery is the way to go. But we just really need to try to get outside the box here and come up with every possibility. If maybe one of the organizations steps up and wants to buy it, that would be great, and preserve it the way it is. But again, this has, at least to everyone who lives down there, and I know people around town, it has very significant historic value to the town. And the town really needs to think about how we can preserve this. Again, because once it's done, it's done. And if it does go forward with development, I'd certainly like to be able to see how we can get ahead of what it's going to look like. You know, certainly the driveways, the extra houses, the traffic, you know, can we mitigate that somehow? Certainly the developer, if he pays for it, he gets to develop it, I respect that. But it'd be nice if it gets to that point, we get to try to have some sort of say in what this is gonna look like, and try to make it as little or as least intrusive as possible. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Come on up.
Good evening, my name is Joy Michaud, I live at 279 High Road. Mr. Barton passed away almost 2 years ago, and the trustees have done nothing to the property. There are trees that have fallen over, they haven't mown the lawn, they haven't picked up the leaves, they've let the house just go. So I understand that there's a bit of altruism that's being heralded right now, but I don't believe that it's sincere. The Plummer family, the Story family, the Barton family, they're the original settlers of Newbury. Newbury is a farming community. When I came in and sat down, you were all talking about the Spencer Pierce Little Farm. Spencer Pierce Little Farm. I've lived in Newbury now for 15 years, and what brought me here was the beautiful countryside. Mrs. Bushy's donation of Old Town Hill, all of the reservation down there. And Mrs. Bushy's house was unceremoniously torn down, ripped down, carted off, and now there are 3 enormous mansions that are way out of scale for our neighborhood. I know I need to keep this very gentle, but I've seen the Offen Boardman house destroyed without a fight. That was down by Spencer Pierce Little Farm. How many 18th century houses do we have left in America? Mr. Barton kept very good care of his house when he was alive. I knew him, he was a very nice man, and he was very, very concerned that his property be preserved and also taken care of for generations. He never had children. His sisters didn't have children as far as I know, but he was very concerned with preserving as it is. I just don't want to see this beautiful piece of property go the way of the Bushy Farmstead, of the Oppen Boardman house, of the houses that are now on, that the developer True just put in. That used to be all open space with Mrs. Bushy's barn right there on High Road. That's all changed. I see $1 million, $1 million, $2 million, $2 million. It is so out of scale with what is on High Road. These developers are just coming in and, you know, I have to say that it's very presumptuous that the plan by the developers of November 5th, 2018 came in and they have a whole subdivision. Newbury is not for sale that way. Newbury is not for sale. We're losing our identity by, you know, this. It was so presumptuous of them to come in and say, yeah, well, we can perk here, we can put in 5, 6, 7 houses in here, we'll put in, you know, it turns into Las Vegas. All of a sudden, a very quiet neighborhood. I'm totally against this subdivision, and I agree with what is being proposed by other people. I'm so sorry that I feel so angry about this, but I understand that the town is kind of in a bind right now. I mean, it took how many years to get the police station approved? But I just feel that there's a way to work with either the trustees or with Greenbelt or with Historic New England, with someone to somehow preserve that land and to try and keep the flavor of what brought us all to Newbury. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have public comment to offer? Lon?
Lon Hockmeister, 281 High Road, my next door neighbor. I've got about 120 feet of my property running along the what's plan for the subdivision, and that's not why I'm talking, believe it or not. This is Old Town Newbury, everybody. If you look at the first map from 1635, it was drawn in 1635, but if you look at it, that property's on the map. And the development is just off of a scenic byway. So as you're driving past, right now we see trees and we see fields and a beautiful old 1700s house sitting there. And turn right instead of turning left as you're coming down from Newburyport. Turn right down Newman Road rather than left on the Cottage, and you'll see exactly what this is going to look like. And it's right across from a historic building. If there's anything you can do, I'm out of ideas. I think this was a great idea. I'm out of ideas on what to do about it. I know you guys can just reach in your pocket, come up with $1.6 million. But it just seems, I don't know. It's on the books for about $330,000 agriculturally, and all of a sudden it's going to be worth, I mean, somebody's already paying 1.6 for it, and I'm sure they're going to get a lot more than that for it, for the lots.
According to laws, the town would have to match the offer.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Well, can the town counter offer? Can the town
If
can't
we-
go in and say, could we make an arrangement for part of it?
If my understanding is correct, we would need to match a bona fide offer.
It's my understanding that we really have 3 choices. Match the current offer, assign our right to buy it to a nonprofit, or allow the sale to go through. Those are our only options. And I mean, I heard of it, what everybody was saying about development and runoff, and those are all extremely valid concerns. But unfortunately, you're speaking to the wrong board.
No, I understand that,
All
yeah, you
to the
guys
planning board, and
I realize there are only 3 options.
And another thing, CPA, Community Preservation Act, Newbury has always resisted adopting it. I know I've watched West Newbury preserve many wonderful properties and places.
Everyone.
with CPA funds, we really need to look at bringing CPA back, because if we adopt it, and a few, 4, 6, 10 years go by, there can be money in an account to save a property like this. And, you know, the town's not in a financial bind, our finances are in good shape. Unfortunately, our scope of authority here is very narrow. We would have to make a really sound case to justify spending that kind of money to match the bona fide offer. And it's unfortunate that the property's worth so much money to the people that wanna see it preserved. But it is.
Not to the people who wanna see it preserved, but you're saying to the people who wanna buy it and put a development on it, it's worth that amount of money. Cause they're the ones that came up with the figure, right?
Well,
Yes.
that was the offer that was made.
Right.
So I really like the,
I love the idea, cemetery.
I really like that.
The question is
Just
how to.
a question here, the house and the lot, that lot that's on is sold, right? I mean, that basically went through.
Still a purchase and sales, isn't it?
Purchase and sale, I think.
Until this,
Right, and does he withdraw his bid if he can't get that? Well, anyway, what I was getting at is if you did, we don't have to sit, the town doesn't have to own it forever. The town could own it long enough to put a restriction on it, at least. Buy it, turn the back of it into a cemetery, sell the front part.
yeah.
You'd have to sell it at a loss because nobody's gonna pay, you know, $2.1 million, $2 million for that house and the property if they're not gonna chop it up and build on it. But that's a thought. I mean, you buy it, put some restrictions on it, maybe keep part of it, and then put the rest of it back up for bid.
You know what's hard, Ron? I mean, I was around long enough and tried to get CPA through. And the town's so diverse, I worked very hard. I think it was 100%, Martha, was it 100% reimbursement then?
In the beginning,
it was, yes. And then it became 80 and 70, now it's not that viable. What is it now?
I'm not sure what it is now, although I know the legislature
I
has
think it's
been
like
taking.
20.
So the problem is, the town wouldn't even buy into that vision back then. You guys right now are so focused on something that makes a lot of sense, but it's hard for me to sell that to someone on Plum Island or, you know, some other part of town. And without the ability with having those funds set aside that grew over time for, like JR said, West Newbury and Newburyport did a lot with their CPA. So unless Martha has something up her sleeve, or our attorney, Miss Murphy, might think that, there's something that the seller might wanna do along the lines of what was said earlier, maybe you can take that back to the seller.
I'm done, I'll sit down.
Thanks, Ron.
I mean, that puts you on the line a little bit, but I mean,
I'm happy to respond.
I mean, they're very good folks that worked with that piece of property for a very long time. I think they had it right when Store and everyone first started with it, so maybe they wanna see something, maybe they can do something.
I understand all the concerns and I understand the questions you're asking. I think the problem at this point is the timing. As you said, Mr. Barton passed away 2 years ago. At that point, James Connolly's acting as a trustee. This isn't his personal land that he's trying to sell and make money that he's gonna put in his pocket. He's acting as a trustee. The Barton family set it up in their wills not to preserve the land, but that it be sold off and the land go to the charities. The charities are the beneficiaries. Jim has a fiduciary legal obligation to get the best value for the land, and if he doesn't do that, the beneficiaries can sue him. He also has a purchase and sale agreement because the statute required in order to offer it to the town that he have a signed purchase and sale agreement. And under the purchase and sale agreement, he's required to go through the legal process with your board, and then if you choose to buy it, of course the trust would be happy to sell it, but they have to sell it at the same price. So if you choose not to sell it, then they're obligated to sell it to the developer. So it's just a timing standpoint. At this point, kind of 2 years after the fact of him passing away, it's the law, the process under the law has been set in motion. There's a binding agreement, he
Now, that
has
was
the
in
buyer.
that was in land court for quite a while, right?
Yeah, it was, you know, that was a zoning related issue that we were trying to resolve, it was.
I mean, was it a year?
I don't know if it was quite a year, I think we started at the beginning of this year, and that
So
had
that
to do.
time kinda got away from everyone because.
Right, right, but I think that, you know, the time for having those conversations, unfortunately, from a legal standpoint, have passed because it went on the market, there's a binding contract in place. And I just wanna clarify that the house and the land are separate, so under the statute, what's being presented to the town is the land.
Just the agricultural.
And not the house. But I just wanted to explain that if this was, a private individual just selling the land for his own personal bank account, then I think, you know, and there wasn't a binding agreement already in place, I think there might be more flexibility. But I think when you put the fact that there's binding contracts in place and the fact that he's a fiduciary trustee, there's a timing problem for the trust.
So I have a question.
Sure.
I think I heard you correct. Did you say that the gentleman who passed away that owned it, that had no children and no heir, so to speak, left it all in a will to,
The trust.
There's a trust.
there's a trust,
Trust.
but this was to have the land sold and the proceeds of the sale go to various charities and nonprofits.
Yeah.
So the owner had an opportunity at that time to give that land to a trust, like something like the trustees or Essex
I
County,
think so.
to them.
Thought it was an irrevocable trust.
Well, within a trust, and I'm not a trust and estates attorney.
Yeah.
I'm a real estate attorney. I have not actually seen the trust. So, as you know, you may know, Jim Connolly is, a trust attorney, and that's why he was made the trustee of the trust for the family. I'm not familiar with the details. All he told me is that the heirs of the family all set it up. They each picked the charity that they wanted their share to go to, and that's how it's set up. Like I said, I haven't seen it myself, the exact terms. I'm just speaking to the general legal obligations of a trustee under a trust and how it's been explained to me that the trust and the beneficial interest in the trust, how that's structured now that the last remaining family member has passed away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martha, just for the record, if the land goes on to be developed, will there be opportunity for public comment as the project would progress, or not necessarily?
The issue is that the division that's shown on the A&R plan is done through what's called the approval not required process, which doesn't mean that it doesn't need approval from the planning board. But the lots that were created under Mass General Law, given the fact that they had adequate frontage on Cottage Road and adequate area, so it's not a subdivision per se. And as such, A&R plans can't be conditioned. You know, they're endorsed by the planning board, so it's not gonna be a subdivision with a new road going in or, some other development that would actually require a public hearing or anything like that. The lots are just sold as is.
That means a lot to being on the planning board for as long as I was, so that control kind of diminishes when you don't have the town approved road and everything else and the ability to structure things and drainage and everything else. It's just an A&R lot that would occur from anyone else in town that wants to sell something. And they have enough frontage and enough square footage, so.
So there's not gonna be any public process, that would be allowable under the law of the board.
And that, even though I thought there was a discrepancy with how close the house was to the barn,
That was the issue that went to court and has been resolved.
has been resolved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the town has no right to ask for low-income housing or anything else. We can't condition or request anything in these lots?
Not at this point. I mean, as Attorney Murphy said, there is a purchase and sale. In effect, there's a contract, and that's basically what kind of governs at this point. So the other factor that would come into play if the town were to vote to exercise its right of first refusal is that, town meeting still has to approve the funds, and so a town meeting would have to be called within 90 days. I believe it's 90 days, and town meeting would have to vote for the funding. Sometimes a nonprofit can step in and help with the purchase and help bridge that timing, but we don't have that in this case. And no nonprofits have stepped forward at this point to express any interest in the plan.
That would be a 2/3 vote, right? I imagine.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Land purchase, I think so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, would somebody like to read the 2 emails into record? That'd be great.
So we got an email from Lon Hackmeister. Martha, is there a way that abutters can be kept informed of any planned or future changes in the classification of the previous Bob Barton property at 277 High Road? I have over 100 feet of abutting property with the Barton property and would like to know about any future attempts to change existing zoning classifications for this neighboring property. Last year, without any notification to abutters, the Barton Trust had the property rezoned from 1 building lot to 6 building lots. I understand that the property is still residential agricultural, but now there is the potential for new owners to build 5 additional houses on the property. It seems that abutters should have been notified of this request and invited to participate in the planning board discussion of this request. At this point, that issue is water under the bridge, but now I hear that the new owner wants to further subdivide the portion of land that the old Plummer Homestead house and a large barn sit on into 2 separate lots, one for the house and one for the larger barn. Anything to make more money. This would be a travesty. The property has been under the ownership of one family since the early 1700s and has been the northeast cornerstone of the Lower Green for over 300 years. I hate the idea that the other 5 lots will likely mean more mansions in Old Town Newbury, but please not on property lot directly abutting the Lower Green. Please keep the owners of the abutting properties notified of any formal actions being taken by the new owners to further subdivide this historic property. Also, if possible, please make sure that the Newbury Historical Commission is kept informed about any attempts to modify the existing appearance of this historic property, as seen from our Lower Green. The real estate broker that was selling the land for the Barton Trust told prospective buyers that he thought the house should be bulldozed to make way for a modern building. Hopefully, this is not also the intent of the new owner. We also don't need another Old Town Newbury historic barn turned into a $1 million+ mansion, as we have recently seen happen to 2 other barns in the neighborhood, maybe 3 if the remodel of Mary Chick's old barn continues. Also, I see that the newly remodeled Bushy Barn now seems to have a permanent resident living in it. Thank you for your help on this matter. Lon Hackmeister, 281 High Road. And then Michelle, I'm gonna have Ajori?
Jerry,
Or
you're
Jerry.
gonna read that whole thing, it's a novel.
Well, I'm just gonna read, I will be attending tonight's public hearing on the disposition of Robert Barton 61A property. I'm hoping that you can include the letter and attach PDF and information given to the Selectman before tonight's meeting. I apologize for the last minute urgency of this, thank you very much for your help. In the letter, I'm not gonna read it because it is long, it's all about, the green burial opportunity to have a cemetery at the location, and if anybody's interested, please, her letter will be made public record once the meeting's over. I just wanna be clear that, I mean, I'm not gonna speak for the board, I'm gonna speak for me, but I personally understand how important this property is. I do, and it's not that, I don't think this board doesn't care, I think we do care. I just think that our hands are really tied.
Do you wanna invite more public comment or have us talk at this point?
I mean, I think at this point, I think we've heard from everybody.
So I guess my first question legally is if we exercised our right either to purchase the property or to pass on our purchasing ability to an, I don't even know if we can, to an unknown buyer,
They'd have to step up.
and they fail to step up, or town meeting fails to purchase it, what happens at that point? 'Cause I don't think we've ever crossed, I've been a selectman, we have not crossed that bridge. So I don't know what would happen then, and I don't know if anyone here does know.
And I'm pretty sure, Martha, the
Martha,
clock's already started, right? It's 120 days.
Yeah, the clock started the date of the notice of intent to sell, which was September 12th, and I think runs out on January 10th.
Wow.
How can that be?
It's state law.
Essentially a private sale of private land.
What strikes me about this is that I know it's been in this family for 300 years, and I understand the importance, historic value of that property. But the gentleman that owned it, in his own personal will, didn't will it to be preserved, as is.
Can I speak to that just briefly?
Sure.
Just, the way I understand it, it was an irrevocable trust, so he wasn't able to modify it too much, and that the trust dates back, I mean, the last document related to the appointing of the trustee was from 1995. Do you remember what Newbury looked like in 1995? So I don't think that Mr. Barton understood back in 1995 that someone was gonna buy up a piece of land behind the house and divide it into 7 house lots. I think he thought it was gonna stay in agricultural use. And I think by the time it became clear that that is gonna happen, I don't think there was much he could do about it. The trust was already made.
And I'm sure that Stora Humphrey and Mary Barton wouldn't have wanted 7 houses behind her either, but it's just the way it is.
Do we have another meeting before the January 10th deadline?
Christmas Eve.
I mean, we can make another meeting if there's a reason to.
Well, I mean, this new idea that has been presented today of a cemetery purchase, that I think, sadly, the town is not in a place financially to purchase the property, as much as I think most of the board, I haven't talked to anyone else about it, but I think we'd all like to see that property preserved. I don't think the town, and I'm speaking only as one member of the board right now, can authorize this expenditure and expect to have it approved by town meeting. If the neighbors can take this idea and actually get people behind it, whether it's from the cemetery or anywhere else interested in the purchase of the land, I would much rather see it purchased by a non-for-profit or turned into a cemetery than turned into houses, because I think you're absolutely right. We all want this to stay, especially in that area. We don't want a subdivision right there.
Is there any way we can buy some time? 'Cause like I said.
Well, that's why I was
yeah,
saying,
like I said, I
if
would
we,
love to buy some time to pursue that idea. Like I
if
said,
we
and I
continue
don't
the
wanna-
public hearing, I believe we can. We have to continue it to a date certain that is before we run out of time, is
before
my
January
understanding.
10th.
Now, I don't know if there's any potential for extension, but the boards potentially are meeting next week.
Yeah,
Well, we're meeting on the
golf.
Tuesday of next week for the golf.
Yeah,
Right,
let's just not give,
to be
We
determined.
need a lot of time on it.
you know, if you can find $1.6 million by next Tuesday, I wanna talk to you.
And
But I
the
mean,
only thing I don't know, and I think the cemetery is a really good idea. What are the setbacks for wells for cemeteries?
There aren't any, not in Massachusetts,
There
not if you're not, like, one of the reasons I thought about green burial, you don't have to bury it as deep, you don't have embalmed bodies, so you don't have embalming fluid in the soil, which is the only toxic issue related to cemeteries and water. As far as I know, there are no regulations in Massachusetts about it, and there aren't any in New Hampshire. But the sites, the websites that I put at the bottom of that letter, those are the New England resources on this subject, and they have packets on how to do this, like how to create a green cemetery, and all the rules and regulations and all of that. There are kits out there to make it happen. I'd be more than happy to spearhead that if that's something we really wanted to consider doing. And there's a cemetery right there. I mean,
Right.
it's not like,
And on the property.
and on the
And on
property,
property,
so it's
yeah.
not like this is totally out of left field. It's been good enough for 300 years,
Well, I guess what,
so.
and I can't speak for Damon, but I guess what he's also thinking about, if there's ability to wrap a business plan around having a cemetery, it would be kind of nice to, we could push this to the last moment if folks thought they could come up with some sort of business plan that would support the purchase price of the property
Chairman Colby,
for the cemetery.
the lawyer wants to speak, I think.
Would you like me to?
Yes, please.
Obviously, I represent the trustee, and the board has counsel. I would just suggest, and I'm sure you would, that you consult with town council, because if you assign to a nonprofit, there's limitations in the statute for how the land can be used. So I just want you to be aware, because the trust feeling has been, if the town's able to purchase it for the price that they were able to get from it, they're not opposed to selling it to the town. I just say, it sounds like people are trying to put a lot of time and effort into trying to find a way to save it. I would just wanna ask you for your own purposes to kind of look at what your options are in working with a nonprofit to do that.
Can you disclose how many charities are involved?
Well, I will tell you that I haven't been told all the charities by Mr. Connolly, but even if I knew them, I would not be able to disclose
Well,
them.
we're not looking for names, but the number.
What he had told me is that I believe, as you said, it was the Mr. Barton and his two sisters, and my understanding is that they had each designated charities. So I believe there's at least 3, and there may be more, but I don't know all they are. As I said, I haven't seen the trust.
Another thing too to consider is that the only opportunity we have to do anything, if somebody can pull a Hail Mary out of the sky, is on that land. There's still the homestead and the barn that is not part of 61A.
Right, but that's.
And that is still, I mean, those are of historical significance. And I don't think.
Without that land, you can't put 2 houses, it's only got 57,000 square feet on the house lot. He's gotta have that land to move the property line over, to put 2 houses in that.
Well, I mean, I don't have any problem entertaining a motion unless the rest of the board does, so, holding a place and time right now until next Tuesday. It's not a lot of time, but it might be.
Right, I would second that.
I mean, does Martha, does the planning board feel that that's crazy? Have you exhausted all?
Well, I think, the planning board recognized the significance of the parcel, the location, the lower green, the open space that's there. So its recommendation was if there was some way to preserve that, either by assigning the right to a nonprofit or some organization, I think the board would recommend doing that. So far nobody's stepped up, and I don't know what the limitations would be.
So, I mean, does it cause any consternation to the attorney? Does it cause, we need to wait 1 week? So, I mean, we certainly can at least slow things down by a week to put everyone's head together one last time, because you guys have done a lot of work together. Show you how this one went in.
Yes.
When we say that nobody has stepped up, do we know that they know about it? I mean, has anyone presented it or
That's right.
approached these people? I'm sure they read the paper and maybe they missed it, so.
Something you folks can work on over the next week for sure.
Yeah, and I think.
Generally, Greenbelt and other entities of that are pretty keen for most open parcels that come up for sale, I'm sure many people are aware of them.
Alright, well, until we actually hear from them, maybe it'd be a good idea, yeah, I certainly don't mind getting involved, to try and help. And I think the fact that we have a very short period of time, that we should exercise everything we can to use, to stretch all of that out. It may be for nothing, but at least at the end of the day, we can say we tried. And we can tell that to other people, and, you know, we can just try to do our best.
I think the town planner had a response to the question about reach
Yeah,
out.
I did, I reached out to the trustees and to Essex County Greenbelt. I did not hear back from the trustees. I did have a conversation with the land acquisition person at Essex County Greenbelt. And they also recognize the value, but are not in a position to, they would also have to match the 1.625 million purchase price, and they're not in a position to do that right now.
Do you have, so you probably have a good contact list for these organizations, cause that's something you could share with us, and save us a little bit of work?
I mean, I have some, I can give you the contacts. Again, I think Essex County Greenbelt was pretty, solid with their answer. As I said, I didn't hear back from the others.
Well, so, I mean, again, it's a Hail Mary, but we've at least gotta try. And then one other thing I wanna ask, so it kinda sounds, and this is actually directed to you, that if it does go sold for development, there's nothing we can do to try to minimize any of this, not even drainage? There's no input that the town can have in this? I mean, where the property, where the houses are actually located, further back versus right on top of the road, things like that.
Those usually fall under planning board.
Right, the issue here is that since they were created through this A&R process, the board was.
And what is A&R?
So it means approval not required, but that doesn't mean
It's not a
means
subdivision.
it's not a subdivision. So if a lot has the required frontage on a road, the board basically is required legally to endorse the plan, and it gets recorded. So, and as individual building lots, the board doesn't have any say over where the houses get placed, or, locations, any of that, drainage, because they're under an acre and they're residential. So there's certain exclusions for stormwater, and things like that, for residential properties and the size of property. That said, if we have an opportunity to talk with the developer, we can certainly pass these things on, but it's not something that the planning board has purview over.
I mean, it'd be nice to try to have a discussion with him if it goes forward, just to, again, try and minimize the impact on the roads. And, the people out behind that are worried about drainage.
Right, and everybody's very sensitive.
And you got 5 driveways, maybe 100 feet long that are paved, that's gonna change everything.
Yes. Especially because they're at the top of the hill.
Right.
It's all the way down the street.
Thank you.
And just an observation too, because our town is at that kind of apex where we're gonna be developed. There's a large segment of our town too, because we have so much open space now with trustees, Greenbelt and Fish and Wildlife. I don't know if this is true, but I've been told there's county marshes are like 38% open space. So a lot of people say, put a big house in for the tax base, because we have no industry and we have no commercial development. So it's a fine line for, we as leaders of the town too, because there's a whole section of our town that doesn't mind certain types of development. And the other thing is, as Martha really explained, this one is hard because it's not a subdivision, and we don't have the ability to really control it. So that makes it hard.
So I think one of the things that we should, well, these neighborhood group does their diligence in trying to find a nonprofit interested in preserving that. And I think we need to reach out to town council and see what, if anything, we can do. Do our own due diligence.
So make a motion, David, to continue.
I move to continue the public hearing to December 17th at 5:45 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you everyone for bringing your concerns. They're shared by the board.
What time are we meeting next Tuesday?
5
Five.
o'clock.
I would have been here at 7.
Now, we're gonna do the same thing for the Newbury Golf Center. So, this is, actually, I'm gonna take a brief pause if people are gonna get up and leave, and let you make as much noise as you need to on the way out, and then we're gonna reconvene in 3 or 4 minutes. Because I see a lot of people starting to stand. What?
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Really. Sure, I need to be part of that discussion.
He's just taking a quick recess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw everyone starting to get up, and I know how much noise that makes, so I'm gonna take the opportunity to go to the bathroom.
I think one of the.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We got much meetings. Oh, yeah, I know you just.
So, my name is Joy Michelle. I'd like to contact you, yes, about the fact that there was a meeting that changed from agricultural to residential. There was a meeting last year, and you said, oh, it's just it's for function, it's not, you know.
I meant to say, was it wasn't changed? The parcel was zoned residential agricultural, and it's zoned almost all the time.
I don't know, it's funny stuff, I get emails all the time. I can send out. That's what happened. You know, but I think.
No, you weren't actually, it was just a formality. And I mean, as a butter, I wasn't even notified. This is obscene.
I think it's a setting on my phone.
I just don't know what we'll do. We'll figure it out. My name is Michelle, M-I-C-H-E-L-E. My last name is.
Could I ask you to email me the contacts you have for those organizations?
So John 15
Yeah, I may have left, it didn't seem like such a bad idea until 5 and S look so much alike. It's like, okay, that didn't come out as I hoped. Okay, thank you very much, I appreciate it.
We were told. No, that's right.
The tragedy is that I don't think Mr. Martin wanted this to happen. And the charities that are gonna get, there's no air, there's no descendant that's hanging out there waiting for this money. It's all gonna get divided out to charities that aren't even gonna know. It's not, and that's the sad part. So anyway, see, well, it's not over yet.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's right.
I have no tweets, I'm sorry. There's one grammatical error I was told.
Oh, I didn't even see it. I didn't read it cover to cover. I just
There's two words that I flipped.
Oh.
It says,
The kids
where
won't
you
notice.
to say you were.
See if the kids can find it.
Yeah. See if they can figure it out. Thank you.
All right, and so you can read more information. I forgot where we're at with photographs. Are we ordering that or shall we do that?
You can do that.
Yeah. And we want this to come out before the book signing, right?
Correct. And I can get one stuffed dog if you want before, for the photo.
Well, you sent me a picture of it, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the books, you can see it. I can get one, the production of it won't be that much, but I can get one of them. I already asked.
You ordered tonight?
I already asked about it.
Here we go.
So I can get, you let me know, I'll look it up. So battlegrounds, coffee company, or by a former agency. Yeah. So I wasn't.
All right, folks, I'd like to get things started again. All right, so I call the meeting back to order. This is the public hearing continued from Wednesday, October 30th, 2019, modification of the special permit for Newbury Golf Center, 131, 133, 151 Scotland Road, Assessor's Map R43, lots 2, 11, and 4B. Applicant Eric Sorensen, President Newbury Golf Center, Inc., granted by the Selectman on November 15th, 2017. The applicant requests approval of a proposed plan.
So you shouldn't actually open it, you should just discuss the continuance.
I was just reading.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not gonna actually open that. We are going to continue that to December 17th at 5 p.m.
Yes.
Get a motion?
Motion.
And that's all those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, just for the record, Larry Murphy, Vice Chair of the Planning Board, we unfortunately could not muster a quorum this evening, so I just wanted to announce for the record, we'll also continue our public hearing until the 17th at 5 p.m.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
And that's here.
Yes.
Yes, that will be here.
Thank you. And that takes care of that, and I think we will be moving on to liquor licenses.
Whoa.
Oh, I've had enough.
So, next. You good?
Yeah.
So you guys did the one days, correct?
Yes, the long days are done. So we're at the top of
So what are renewals?
Sunday business hours.
Alright, okay, we can take that one. Request for change of Sunday business hours for off-premise retail alcoholic beverage license. License number 89184-PK-0794, Adele Scrivo, DBA Corner Cupboard, 4 Hanover Street. Change of Sunday business hours to 10 a.m. through 11 p.m.
The motion to approve now, do I need to read Scrivener,
Right
Corner
there.
Cupboard,
That one, that
or is that
motion.
the different one? Sorry, there are a lot of different licenses.
We got a lot going on.
No,
No,
that's
not
the
that.
license.
Okay.
This is a change in, it's an
Hours.
amendment to
The
the
hours.
license.
So, motion to approve the amendment to the license to allow for the 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Sundays.
Second.
Any discussion?
I think as this is allowed under Mass General Law, there's no reason not to grant it.
Yeah, right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
First one.
application for amendment, you're gonna have to guide me through this a little bit, Alan. Rusty Can LLC, DBA Rusty Can, 9 Fruit Street.
So this involved a, public notice, which I didn't realize. So we need to reschedule this to the first meeting in January 14th at 7:50.
I'd entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then do you want me to take you through the next one?
Sure.
Okay.
That'd be wonderful.
So the, Plum Island Grill has applied for multiple amendments. The first being the change of officers, directors, LLC managers. The second being the change of stock interest, and the third being the change of manager. The first and the third do not require a legal advertisement, but the change in stock interest does require a legal advertisement. So it was the advice of town council that we move forward with the first and the third, which would be the change of officers, directors, LLC managers, and the change of manager. And reschedule the change of stock interest to January 14th at 7:30 p.m.
All right.
Okay, so first, I'd entertain a motion for the change of officers, directors, and LLC managers.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Now we need to do the stock interest, correct?
No, now you're going to do the third one, the change of manager.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion for the change of manager.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And now you're going to reschedule the change of stock interest to January 14th at 7:30 p.m. for a public hearing.
Move to reschedule to January 14th at 7:30 p.m. for the discussion of the change of stock interest requiring a public hearing and legal advertisement.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So the change in managers and officers was approved, but the change in stock needs legal notice?
It
Yes.
Okay,
So we can put an ad in the newspaper, is that correct?
Yes.
will we get the ad from the board, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
And that will be on the 14th.
We have to publish before that.
I can give you the details.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That page can go.
So that page is out.
That doesn't seem like
Done.
And so now we will start the licensing rules, which is in the main packet with the agenda on top. So we're
Second. That packet one.
in,
So change of ownership, that was change of directors. Okay, Scrivener, cover, yep,
right there.
this one.
We're gonna do the off-premise, right?
Go through
Yeah.
the motion.
Yeah.
So this is,
I'll read the first two.
I think you should read through until JR.
Oh yeah, JR's gonna read that and then I will read the others.
JR, do you need help finding it?
I'll get it eventually.
It's in this original packet, right?
Yes.
All right, so we'll start off with corner cutting, correct?
Yeah, hold on. You might want
This one.
so they're listed on the agenda, but then
We'll take them this
Behind
way.
me, right, Yep.
So, Adele Scravo, DBA Corner Covered for Hanover Street, Newbury, has a workers' compensation insurance affidavit been completed?
Yes.
Okay, also has included updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record been included?
Yes, there were none.
Okay, so everything is in order?
Yes.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
Alright, I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for Adele Scrivener, DBA Corner Cupboard. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. Approval of any changes in the license management premises or other ABCC requirements received by the ABCC. Receipt of workers' compensation insurance affidavit. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
If I may.
yes,
So, just so everyone understands why this is so complicated, the ABCC has changed their laws, so we're adjusting to a new set of parameters for approving these things. So hopefully we'll get this under our belts and it'll go more smoothly next time.
It's gonna be bumpy tonight.
Now, just to clarify too, does, let's say, the Corner Covered have to do this before the first of the year?
They have to do this by November 30th.
Um,
And then, so all the documentation, their application signed, their renewal application has to be signed, and their workers' compensation insurance affidavit and their contact information updates all has to be submitted to the board by November 30th, which would allow everything to be brought to you tonight for approval, and then forwarded on to the ABCC for their approval.
Meaning, and that's also the receipt of the workman's comp insurance and all that?
Yeah, so, for the,
we'll be going over them all one by one.
Yeah.
With all,
Yeah.
all the fine points.
But I mean, I'm a little lost, this is a 220 license for next year,
it begins January 1st.
and if they don't get the workman's comp to us,
Then
They don't get their license.
they don't get the license. So I hope people know that out in the airwaves.
Ready?
Yep.
Ben E. Sylvanowicz of the Sylvanowicz Family Associates Incorporated, DBA D&J Liquors, 53 Main Street. Have we received the workers' compensation insurance affidavit?
Yes.
Have we received included updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record?
There were no updates,
Okay, so everything is in order.
yes.
I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for the Sylvanovitz Family Associates, Inc., DBA DJ's Liquors. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. Approval of any changes in the license management premises or other ABCC requirements be received from the ABCC. Receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit, license number 00010 PK0794.
That's the next one.
What's the next one?
That's the
Is
next
it?
one, yeah.
Sorry,
That's, the motion ends with
Yeah,
receipt of
motion
workers'
ends.
compensation.
I thought I'd skip further.
So I second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next we have Mr. Jeffrey Christensen, Plum Island Fine Wine and Spirits LLC, DBA The Cottage Wine and Spirits, 14 Plum Island Boulevard, Newbury. Have we received workers' compensation insurance affidavit?
Yes.
Has updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record been included?
There were none recorded.
Okay, so everything is in order?
I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for Plum Island Fine Wine and Spirits, Inc., DBA The Cottage Wine and Spirits. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. Approval of any changes in license management premises or other ABCC requirements be received from the ABCC. Receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye. So now we're gonna move on to the off-premise licenses, wine and malt, right?
Yep. So, everyone at Pizza Factory, just so we don't get out of. Okay, Mr. Angelo Giannopoulos, Pizza Factory Incorporated, DBA Plum Island Provisions, 29 Plum Island Boulevard. Has a workers' compensation insurance affidavit been received?
Yes.
Has updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record been included?
Therefore, none recorded, so, yes.
Okay, so everything is in order?
Yes.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for Pizza Factory Incorporated, DBA Plum Island Provisions. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. 1, approval of any changes in the license management, premises, or other ABCC requirements to be received from the ABCC. And 2, receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Glenn St. Cyr, The Butchery Incorporated, 180 North Street, Danvers, Mass. Has a workers' compensation insurance affidavit been received?
Yes.
Okay, has included updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record been included?
None recorded, so they're fine.
Okay, so everything is in order?
Yes.
So I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for the Butchery Incorporated, DBA Newbury Butchery. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. 1, approval of any changes in the license management, premises, or other ABCC requirements to be received from the ABCC. And 2, receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Narayan K. Patel, Bram C1 LLC, 60 Fruit Street, Byfield, Mass. Has a workers' compensation insurance affidavit been received?
Yes.
Has updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record been included?
No changes.
So everything is in order?
Yes.
I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for Bram C1 LLC, DBA Bram C1 LLC. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. 1, approval of any changes in the license management, premises, or other ABCC requirements to be received from the ABCC. And 2, receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now we're gonna move on to
Bob Lobster.
sale of beverages to be drunk on premises, wine and malt.
Miss Jasmine Lewin, Bob Lobster, 49 Plum Island Turnpike, Newbury, Mass. Has a valid certificate of inspection and compliance with the state building code issued by the building inspector and signed by the fire chief as required by chapter 304 of the Acts of 2004 in General Law, chapter 138, section 12.
Yes.
Have we received a copy of liquor liability insurance certificate as required by chapter 116 of the Acts of 2010 and General Laws, chapter 138, section 12?
Yes.
And have we received a workers' compensation insurance affidavit?
Yes.
And has updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record been included?
No changes.
Okay, so everything is in order?
Yes, it is.
I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for Bob Lobster. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. Approval of any changes in the license management premises or other ABCC requirements be received from the ABCC. Issuance of a certification of inspection, issuance of a certification of inspection, receipt of the liquor liability insurance certificate, receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we'll move to Old Town Country Club, care of Mr. Christopher H. Muse, 10 Marsh Avenue. Has a valid certificate of inspection and compliance with the state building code issued by the building inspector and signed by the fire chief as required by chapter 304 of the Acts of 2004 and General Law, section 130, chapter 138, section 12.
Yes.
There's a copy of liquor liability insurance certificate as required by chapter 116 of the Acts of 2010 in General Laws, chapter 138, section 12.
Yes.
Have we received a workers' compensation insurance affidavit?
Yes.
Okay, and has included contact information for the licensee and manager of record been received?
No changes.
Okay, so everything is in order?
Yes, it is.
I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for Old Town Country Club Incorporated. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. 1, approval of any changes in the license management premises or other ABCC requirements be received from the ABCC. 2, issuance of a certificate of inspection. 3, receipt of a liquor liability insurance certificate. 4, receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we will move on to Rusty Can LLC, James P. Sullivan, DBA Rusty Can, 9 Fruit Street, Byfield. Has a valid certificate of inspection in compliance with the state building code issued by the building inspector and signed by the fire chief as required by chapter 304 of the Acts of 2004 and general law, chapter 138, section 12.
Yes.
Has a copy of liquor liability insurance certificate as required by chapter 116 of the Acts of 2010 and general law, chapter 138, section 12.
Yes.
Have we received a workers' compensation insurance affidavit?
Yes.
Okay, have we received any updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record?
There's no, changes, but there will be changes that are coming forward, coming forward. So yes.
All right, so everything is in order,
Yes.
as we can see. I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve the 2020 retail license for Rusty Can LLC, DBA Rusty Can. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. Approval of any changes in license management premise or other ABC requirements be received from the ABCC. Issuance of a certificate of inspection. Receipt of liquor license, liquor liability insurance certificate. Receipt of workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Now we have Mr. James Hilton, Old Newbury Golf Club. Have we received a valid certificate of inspection in compliance with the state building code issued by the building inspector and signed by the fire chief as required by chapter 304 of the Acts of 2004 and general laws, chapter 138, section 12?
Yes.
Has a copy of liquor liability insurance certificate as required by chapter 116 of the Acts of 2010 and general laws, chapter 138, section 12?
Yes.
And have we received a workers' compensation insurance affidavit?
Yes.
Has any updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record been included?
No changes.
So everything's in order?
Yes, it is.
I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for Rusty Can LLC, DBA Rusty Can. However, the license shall not be issued. Hold on, this should be Old Town.
Old Town, oops, yeah. Just
Yeah.
drop that down.
Sorry, I move to approve the 2020 license renewal for the Old Town Country Club and doing business as Old Newbury Golf Club. 319 Newburyport Turnpike. Approval of any changes in the license management premises or other ABCC requirements be received from the ABCC. Issuance of a certificate of inspection. Receipt of a liquor liability insurance certificate. Receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Greg T. Pugh, Plum Island Beachcomber Incorporated, DBA Plum Island Beachcomber. Has a valid certificate of inspection in compliance with the state building code issued by the building inspector and signed by the fire chief as required by chapter 304 of the Acts of 2004 and general law, chapter 138, section 12.
Yes.
Have we received a copy of liquor liability insurance certificate as required by chapter 116 of the Acts of 2010 and general laws, chapter 138, section 12?
Yes.
Have we received workers' compensation insurance affidavit?
Yes.
Okay, has any included updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record been included?
No changes.
So everything's in order?
Yes.
I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for Plum Island Beachcomber Incorporated, doing business as Plum Island Beachcomber. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. 1, approval of any changes in the license management premises or other ABCC requirements be received from the ABCC. 2, issuance of a certificate of inspection. 3, receipt of the liquor liability insurance certificate. And 4, receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
Second. Sorry.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Mr. Mark Freary, Mr. Francis Broadberry, Plum Island Grill Incorporated, Marcus Ferrari manager, DBA Plum Island Grill. Has a valid certificate of inspection in compliance with the state building code issued by the building inspector and signed by the fire chief as required by chapter 304 of the Acts of 2004 and general law, chapter 138, section 12.
No, not to date.
Have we received a copy of liquor liability insurance certificate as required by chapter 116 of the Acts of 2010?
Yes,
And have we received a workers' compensation insurance affidavit?
yes,
Have we received included updated contact information for the licensee and manager of record?
there has been a change in manager approved this evening, and yes, we received it.
Okay. So is everything in order? That
Yes.
is,
No, it's not, no, I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm so used to saying yes. The first one, the certificate of inspection has not been received, and therefore, it's renewed but held.
okay. So,
That's my understanding.
What was the last thing you said?
The certificate of inspection,
Yeah.
you haven't completed that, it hasn't been submitted.
Yeah.
So we can't release your liquor license.
Okay, so if I submit that certificate before the end of the year, will you be able to issue that?
Yes,
Everything else is in order, it's just the one thing?
that's right.
correct.
So
And I know you've been working with Stan.
I have been working with Sam, we had a piece of equipment replaced during the summer, and we contacted about for an electrical application to have it done, which I wasn't aware you had to do it, and he must have been aware, but I cannot find the electrician anywhere. I've been trying to get him for 12 weeks. I brought in 3 other electricians, but other electricians do not want to pull permits. All work that we got to, so I'm in a bit of a pickle. So I'm working with Sam closely to look at that.
Okay.
Now, it's been a bit of a nightmare. I apologize.
Oh, that's all right, understood.
But it has to be signed off by Stan and the fire
Yes.
chief. So as soon as we receive that,
And then does it have
Sam has done the inspection, and he's approved everything. The only issue is that permit.
so as soon as the board of selectmen
Fire chief
receives,
has to sign off on it also.
right,
We'll get it done. And we apologize for any hiccups, and this is our first year with up marks, so,
Things happen.
yeah, we're trying to get up to speed too.
right.
and will that have to go to the ABCC as well, or does it just have to come to us?
Well, it's been my understanding, why don't you make the motion?
Okay.
So I move to approve the 2020 retail license renewal for Plum Island Grill Incorporated, DBA Plum Island Grill. However, the license shall not be issued until the following criteria have been met. 1, approval of any changes in the license, management, premises, or other ABCC requirements to be received from the ABCC. 2, issuance of a certificate of inspection. 3, receipt of the liquor liability insurance certificate. 4, receipt of a workers' compensation insurance affidavit.
Second. All right, so now,
So you're approving the renewal.
Yeah.
But you're holding it until they have their certificate of inspection.
yeah.
Okay.
My question is partially just for their benefit, which is, once we receive that certificate of inspection, does it then have to also go to ABCC before the license is issued? Or does it just have to come to our office? So if they showed up on,
It only has to come here.
Okay.
To this office.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear, so they know what steps have to be done so that they can actually continue to be in the liquor selling business.
So basically, you're approved, but
We need that.
they're holding your license until you submit your
And that's a
inspection
state,
certificate.
that's a state thing.
It's the state law.
State.
Yeah, so as of, if we haven't got it by January 1st, we can't let you keep signing.
I'll hopefully have it to you next week. I'm
Great.
working on it anyway.
I hope so too, I just wanna make sure that everyone is clear on what's going on.
You know, the electrician who will approve me up with record, right?
Yeah.
Life starts straight life.
All right,
I'll find it.
You too.
thank you.
And then
I move to vote to sign the ABCC renewal certifications for 2020.
second,
All those in favor?
Aye. I move to vote to sign the ABCC 2020 Census Population Increase Estimate Form.
seasonal population increase estimation.
That.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Alright, one page at a time.
Alright.
Having fun yet?
Yeah, yeah.
There, okay. Make sure we didn't skip anything from there.
Yeah, but oh, Corey,
The Cory approval.
yes,
Yeah.
which is swimming in paper here.
It's,
Here we go, okay, so the, Corey policy adopted December 10th, 2019 for Corey checks on potential employees. The purpose, Town of Newbury recognizes the need to ensure a safe environment for those we serve. As one means of providing a safe and credible environment, the town has implemented this criminal offender record information Corey policy. So, this policy is applicable to the criminal history screening of prospective and current employees, contractors, volunteers, interns, vendors, and professional licensing applicants. The Corey and other criminal history checks may be part of the general background check for employment, volunteer work, or licensing purposes. The following practices and procedures will be followed. This policy applies to any town position, paid or unpaid or contracted, that may in the course of its duties have access to vulnerable populations such as the elderly, disabled, or children, or any other position that the town must or is authorized to perform Corey checks on pursuant to law or regulation. Conducting Corey screenings. Corey checks will only be conducted as authorized by the DCJIS and MGL, Mass General Law, and only after a Corey acknowledgement form has been completed. With the exception as noted below in annual checks, if a new Corey check is to be made on a subject within a year of his or her signing of the Corey acknowledgement form, the subject shall be given 72 hours notice that a new Corey check will be conducted. A Corey acknowledgement form may be withdrawn by providing the town with written notice thereof. Initial Corey checks, all prospective and current employees, contractors, volunteers, interns, vendors, and professional licensing applicants of the town of Newbury will be subject to a Corey screening in accordance with this policy after a conditional offer of employment, volunteer assignment, or other municipal relationship has been made. Annual Corey checks. Unless inconsistent with the collective bargaining agreement, the town may conduct annual Corey checks for those working with vulnerable populations, with reappointment to be conditioned on an updated Corey check. All library employees or volunteers, all council and aging employees and volunteers, recreation commission employees or volunteers who are running programs or classes where children age 18 or younger will participate, all fire and police department employees, all emergency management team members and volunteers, and any other employee where appropriate. Access to Corey. All Corey obtained from the DCJIS is confidential, and access to the information must be limited to those individuals who have a need to know. This may include but not be limited to hiring managers, staff submitting the Corey requests, and staff charged with processing job applications. The town of Newbury must maintain and keep a current list of each individual authorized to have access to or view Corey. This must be updated every 6 months and is subject to inspection upon request by the DCJIS at any time. An informed review of a criminal record requires training. Accordingly, all personnel authorized to review or access Corey at the town of Newbury will review and be thoroughly familiar with the educational and relevant training materials regarding Corey laws and regulations made available by the DCJIS. Additionally, the town of Newbury is an agency required by Mass General Law to maintain a Corey policy. Therefore, the town of Newbury shall ensure that all personnel authorized to conduct criminal history, background checks, and or to review Corey information will review and will be thoroughly familiar with the educational and relevant training materials regarding Corey laws and regulations made available by the DCJIS. Use of criminal history and background screening. Corey use for employment purposes shall only be accessed for applicants who are otherwise qualified for the position for which they have applied. Unless otherwise provided by law, a criminal record will not automatically disqualify an applicant. Rather, determinations of suitability based on the background checks will be made consistent with this policy and any applicable law or regulations. Verifying a subject's identity. If a criminal record is received from the DCJIS, the information is to be closely compared with the information on Corey acknowledgement form and any other identifying information provided by the applicant to ensure the record belongs to the applicant. If the information in the quarry record provided does not exactly match the identification information provided by the applicant, a determination is to be made by an individual authorized to make such determinations based on a comparison of the quarry record and documents provided by the applicant. Inquiring about criminal history. In connection with any decision regarding employment, volunteer opportunities, housing, or professional licensing, the subject shall be provided with a copy of the criminal history record, whether obtained from the DCJIS or from any other source, prior to questioning the subject about his or her criminal history. The sources of the criminal history record is also to be disclosed to the subject. And then determining suitability. The determination is made based on the information as provided in section 7 of this policy that the criminal record belongs to the subject and that the subject does not dispute the record's accuracy, then the determination of suitability for the position of the license will be made. Unless otherwise provided by law, factors considered in determining suitability may include but may not be limited to the following: relevance of the record to the position sought, the nature of the work to be performed, time since conviction, age of the candidate at the time of offense, seriousness and specific circumstances of the offense, the number of offenses, whether the applicant has pending charges, any relevant evidence of rehabilitation or lack thereof, and any other relevant information, including information submitted by the candidate or requested by the organization. The applicant is to be notified of the decision and the basis for it in a timely manner. Adverse decisions based on quarry. If an authorized official is inclined to make an adverse decision based on the results of a criminal history background check, the applicant will be notified immediately in accordance with 803 CMR 2.18 and or 2.19 as applicable. The subject shall be provided with a copy of the organization's quarry policy and a copy of the criminal history. The sources of the criminal history will also be revealed. The subject will then be provided with an opportunity to dispute the accuracy of the quarry record. The subject shall also be provided a copy of DCJIS's information concerning the process for correcting the criminal record. Secondary and dissemination logs. All quarry obtained from the DCJIS is confidential and can only be disseminated as authorized by law and regulation. A central secondary dissemination log shall be used to record any dissemination of quarry outside of this organization, including dissemination at the request of the subject. So, any discussion?
Do you want me to make a motion first?
Sure.
Motion to accept the quarry policy.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I have the fear that I often have when we make these changes, which is that I think we need to adopt a quarry policy. I'm always afraid that it may be too stringent. So the first thing that comes to mind is that we would have to quarry all the people who are providing soup for the fundraiser at the library because they're volunteers to the library. And I don't know if we want to give ourselves the option to waive requirements for certain events and things like that so that people can volunteer their time and be helpful without having to do a quarry check.
Well, I don't think that's accurate.
It says all library employees or volunteers. So if you're volunteering at the library, you have to do
It seems to especially deal with a particular demographic that
Right.
they would be exposed to.
So I think that maybe we can modify this, because I know I've been worried, I've been working in schools, and the way the vulnerable population at the schools are minors. The way that the quarry law works at the school district is if you are going to be directly responsible for the minors. So if you're a para-volunteer and you're in a classroom and there's a teacher in that classroom and you're just helping out, I don't believe the quarry check falls into play. But if you're going to be a chaperone on a school trip, then the quarry form comes into play. They quarry everybody anyways. They need to quarry, right? They quarry everybody anyway. But they don't go for it until you're gonna be responsible for that population.
I just,
So-
I mean, definitely they're looking at elderly, minors, you know,
Right.
all the people in that little
So if
category.
you're gonna be volunteering with the Council on Aging and you're gonna take a van full of adults, seniors out on a thing, then you should be quarried. If you're gonna volunteer at the library and you're gonna do a story time with the kids and you're gonna be with the kids alone, you should be quarried. I think the staff at the library should be quarried. I think,
I'm not disagreeing with any of that. What I'm saying is, if the library has a fundraiser and a bunch of people volunteer, and they're gonna be,
do you have to quarry
Some-
everybody?
that's what this
That's
is.
what that
Well, I
says,
think
yeah.
we need to modify that because I don't
That's
think we
what I
need
was
to.
saying.
Right.
I think we should give ourselves the ability to exempt people
Should we-
at request of an organization in
Should,
town.
should we consider tabling it to a less,
Long-winded night?
yeah, so we all have time to dig into it a little more?
I'll second that.
And the only other thing is, and I might have missed it, I read it once and then I heard it again, but who's conducting the quarry?
The town has to identify.
That's,
See,
I
there's one.
don't see it here.
What's the managing, it's either the hire or, so like with
Was
the
that-
library volunteers,
Was that
we
said
don't
in
know.
here?
Yeah, it's sort of, it's laid out a little bit, but
I'd
not
like to, I'd
too.
like to know who's doing it.
The other thing too is you need to designate somebody who's gonna be responsible for,
Interpreting and then
Results.
destroy.
or taking care of them, and in charge of them, so that when somebody asks for it, they're responsible for, you know, you can't just give that out. They have
There's a
to have
reason-
somebody look at it and then you have to hold it back. You can't, it's confidential information.
Like, I don't know, the reason I'm asking Alicia too, not only do you need the logs and everything else like you were just referring to, but I'm not sure everyone can, you know, try to, you know, approach for a quarry test. You know, I know the
You
police
can
do,
request.
police do it, and I
Yeah.
know other, you know, but I'm not so sure if I decided I wanted to query someone if I could.
Well, I think also there's a fee assigned to a quarry, there's a cost to it.
Just be nice to know who really does it and include that in here too, so we know.
So
Well,
I
the-
think that we should identify certain positions that need to be quarried and in our policy and don't, if, you can't broadly brush everybody that comes into town hall needing a quarry. It's just not practical, it's not feasible, it's not
Well,
necessary.
the end of that really is all library employees are volunteer, all council on aging, recreation employees are volunteer, fire and police, emergency management.
Well, only recreation employees that run a program. If they're not gonna be around the vulnerable, if they're just on the committee, then they need to be quarried. You gotta look at it like it's just dealing with a vulnerable population,
So,
and that's how the
So
law.
why don't we take some time,
And look it over.
look it over, we can all develop our own questions.
I don't think I would approve this one, I wouldn't vote to approve this.
I think there is merit, because all we need is for something bad to happen once to wish we did,
Yeah,
but
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah,
perhaps this needs a little shining up.
yeah, I just think it needs a little more, it needs to be honed in.
Okay.
so I motion to continue discussion of the quarry policy until our
January 14th.
January 14th meeting.
And I do think, before I make the motion, before I second the motion, even though this is explicit basically down here, I mean, I think even though I might not be working with the elderly or kids as a selectman, I think we're gonna be queried,
Gonna get what?
quarried.
You worried?
No, but I just,
But why would we get, why would
because
we
I
get
think
quarried?
we're employees, it says it,
Yeah, but
somewhere
we're
in.
not gonna be responsible for any,
But it says employees of the town, if I
So,
look in here
yeah, but
somewhere.
not all employees, see, that's what we need to clarify in that.
I read all employees, but that's okay.
No, that's why we're not approving this
Alright.
tonight. I mean, to quarry everybody in town hall and every volunteer person,
Expensive,
it's
yeah.
gonna be very expensive,
Yeah.
and it's not necessary.
Yeah, and that's why I think we should have clear language.
Now, gentlemen, if
Clear.
you volunteer, excuse me, David, if you wanna volunteer to drive a van for the council on aging, well, now you're gonna need to be quarried, to make sure you're safe.
We know he's not a good driver, what are you talking about?
How do you know?
Hey,
Sorry,
keep your mic
David,
up.
go ahead.
So you're gonna second the motion?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no administrators report tonight. Donnie, we have a Wreaths Across America update.
So, my name is My name is Don Jones, I live on Highfield Road in Newbury. As you know, this is the product that I've been involved with for 5 years. This year, the Scouts have taken on a lot of the responsibility. So I wanna kind of highlight the year, where we're at, where the product's at, and that this Saturday is the ceremony, at the Art Center at noontime. And I do wanna apologize that my health, I was in the ER again in October, down for a few weeks for health reasons, so there may have been a lack of communication amongst all parties. But this year we've ended with over 1,300 wreaths sponsored. And I want to thank every one of the selectmen on board that have supported this project and all the community residents in town that have supported this. So we had such an abundance of wreaths. As you were made aware of, the Newburyport Bank gave a very, very large check, probably the biggest donation we've ever received to date, which covered majority of the Newburyport Cemetery. The Georgetown project, Reach Across America project, had the same results that we did, and they donated over 300 wreaths to cover South Byfield. So that's why we have an abundance this year. And we have so many wreaths that all of Newbury's covered, the Veteran Cemetery in Newburyport is covered, and then there is a good amount of wreaths being tossed over to Amesbury to their Veteran Cemetery. And I've talked to the veteran agent in Amesbury, who is going to be helping us this year, and we're going to continue to add Amesbury now moving forward, because the interest of this project has grown from my first year of only having 150 wreaths to this year having 1,300. There were a lot of extra wreaths that we carried over to next year, so several hundred wreaths are being carried over to next year's project. And that was my call, because when we have 1,300 wreaths, it's gonna be a nightmare trying to logistically coordinate where to place these, which is why Amesbury got wrapped in, because they have a veteran cemetery. So it's pretty easy to kind of last minute put out wreaths. Beyond that, it would take us going out to all the cemeteries in Newburyport to find the veteran headstones within a week notice to place these wreaths. And from working on all the cemeteries here in Newbury, I can tell you that's not the easiest thing in the world, especially with this white stuff falling from the sky. If you walk through the cemeteries here in town, you'll see the Scouts were out these last 2 weeks placing orange markers, and those are indicating where the veterans' graves are to make it easier on Sunday to place these wreaths. That's a suggestion that we started several years ago, because with the snow, some of the headstones can be difficult to locate. So, and I wanted to kind of let you guys know the year. I want to apologize for some of the miscommunication that may have happened, but let you guys know we've had an amazing year this year. And I want to thank everybody involved, from the selectmen down to the community, down to even the bank that gave a very large check. The wreath ceremony is being held at the Byfield Community Arts Center on Saturday at noontime. The Boy Scouts the few members of the Boy Scouts are giving a speech about remember, honor, and teach, which is the main focus of this presentation. We also have a bugle player who will be coming and playing taps, and we're also playing, what's it called? Amazing Grace, my apologies. And then we have a high school student who will be singing the national anthem, and a high school student that will be singing God Bless America. When Amazing Grace is played, we will be displaying all of the veteran names of those who passed away this year from Newbury in Newburyport. I'm trying to get a list from Amesbury as well. So they will be displayed on the screen during the ceremony. This whole purpose of Wreaths Across America is to honor all our deceased veterans. And not everybody who passes away in town is buried in town. A majority of them are, but a majority of them aren't. So I think it's appropriate that we honor all those veterans from this year during the ceremony. So, I've made a big PowerPoint presentation that kind of flows with the ceremony. And we end with honoring all those deceased this year. And while the names played, so will be Amazing Grace. And at the end of that, we'll have a bugle player playing taps. So I will tell you, it's gonna get very emotional during this section. We tried it out a few years ago at the fire department for the last ceremony we did this with. And there was a lot of tear jerking. And I know for me, when I hear taps, I get a little emotional. So it's gonna be nice, and it kind of rings at home. So I really want to take the moment and thank everybody who's been involved with this, the scouts, the community, the banks, the businesses. This is really one of my favorite things that we do in town, and it's a national project. Reach Across America is literally across America. I want to say they added 200 more cemeteries this year. And I also want to mention, we are a unique community that dates back to 1635, before we were America. So we are one of the few across the country that will be placing wreaths on veterans from the Revolutionary War up to the current conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. With that said, we have the honor guard that will be presented by the U.S. Coast Guard here in Newburyport. They're going to be part of this. And as you know, Newburyport is the birthplace of the Coast Guard. The wreaths are also being stored right now. They arrived yesterday morning. We have the full support of the Army National Guard here in the state, and they're currently under guarding our wreaths. And the oldest regiment of the United States Army started here in Massachusetts, dating back to the 101 Engineer Battalion, which the Newburyport Armory is part of. So we really wrapped in all the history of America, and including the oldest part of the United States military, the Coast Guard, which started here in Newburyport, and the United States Army National Guard, which started here in Massachusetts. So I invite all you folk, the selectmen and residents, to join the scouts and myself on Saturday morning. There will be coffee, because it's an early morning for me, and there will be refreshments, donuts, and muffins. So please come out. I will not be in the cemetery, as my health does not allow me to, but the ceremony itself will be really touching. In
What time is the ceremony again?
noontime. So nationally, across the entire country, every location and cemetery, in every group, their ceremony starts at noontime. So this is really, it's a monumental activity that takes place nationally, and we all start same time, across the board. So it's really a really impressive program, and I'm really glad that we brought it here in Newbury 5 years ago. We were the first town in Karen's district, which is the Eastern Essex district of 8 towns. We were the first town to do it, and now I think there's 3 other towns that are on board. Any questions?
I just wanted to circle back on something we discussed
Sure.
at our last meeting, when the question came up of can the town donate to a nonprofit. I know I spoke to you.
Correct.
And I also followed up with Tracy, our administrator, and town council, and
That is, unfortunately, that is not something that the tax dollars can be used for. Even Arlington, so Arlington National Cemetery, which is controlled by the government in DC, don't quote me on the number, but several 100,000 veterans there. Every single wreath has to be sponsored by a non-government agency. Now, people, like I work for the state, I donated some money for this year. The Board of Selectmen, you guys all contributed to me as individuals. That's the way it can be done. Tax dollars cannot be utilized for funding of this project.
I was amazed, I was watching a show on TV, they were covering one of the news shows the other night. And when you lay the wreath, you're supposed to.
So you see this?
You're supposed to approach the grave.
Yes.
Say the person's name.
Yeah.
Lay the wreath down and step back and salute.
So they say a person lives twice. Once when they're alive, and the second time we say their name at the gravestone, giving them their wreaths. Thank you for mentioning that, because there's been also a little bit going around. These are not Christmas wreaths, these are not holiday wreaths. These are formally known as remembrance wreaths. So there's no holiday affiliation, we just place them in December for the holidays. But the whole point is to remember the sacrifice and the service of our veterans. And there's gonna be 3 speeches given by the scouts. One speech, they're each about 5 minutes long. One speech is about honor, remember, and teach. So we're gonna really highlight a lot of that importance of this program on Saturday. And I'm really excited to see this grow over the years. And I really wanna thank all the support that has been from day one, that continues to grow today. And next year, moving forward, there's been talks with the Army National Guard that because this has grown so big and we're involving 3 towns now, that there's a possibility next year we're gonna do the ceremony at the Armory on Low Street. Just because the space and the demand this has brought to the community. So I hope that see many of the familiar faces here in this room in the community on Saturday. Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
All right, any citizens' concerns tonight that, now that we've lost almost everybody? All right, seeing none. We had correspondence that we covered from Jonathan Higgins about his A-Pod concept, cleaning up the green pond. We received a letter of support. We received a letter, November 27th, 2019, from the Commonwealth of Mass Department of Fish and Game regarding a letter of support for DFG's Division of Fish and Game's purchase of property along the Parker River. Do we have any meeting updates?
Last Thursday, we had the DC District Communications meeting here. We laid out the schedule for the next series of meetings. I didn't bring that with me. Do you have it?
I don't have the schedule with me, I put them
I've got it on my phone, but not
Yeah.
good enough.
Oh, no, I got them right here. You want me to read them?
Yes,
to you?
please.
Okay, so they're all gonna take place at 6:30 PM in January, of course I don't have that date. It's at Triton, but I don't have the date, I don't have January, what date written down. February 27th Raleigh, March 26th Salisbury, April 16th Newbury, and May 21st Triton.
And
I'll have to get back to him.
the biggest thing about the meeting was the approval of the changes to the regional agreement. We are going to be disseminating that. DCC is gonna send it out to the town so we can get it to all of our residents so they can review it before the meetings, but the order of operations is that their lawyers, who are the school systems,
DESE?
DS, yes.
The Department of Elementary Secondary Education. They have to approve it first, then it has to come back to us.
Then it has to go to the school committee.
Yeah, school committee has to vote, then it comes back to us for town meeting votes.
Yeah,
And it has to be
so-
approved in all 3 towns.
Yeah.
And the changes that were made to the regional agreement are really minor. They're really minor changes, they're not, a lot of them are grammatically correct and spelling and all that other stuff. So they don't expect the DESC to have any big, they expect it to go pretty quick. Do you have the January date, Joe?
29th, I think.
Yeah, I have it written down next to my calendar. I didn't bring it. And that was the big thing, is trying to make sure that all the ducks get placed in the right order so that that agreement can be ratified by the towns.
Okay, any other meeting updates?
Look, can we continue?
Oh, yeah.
Can I piggyback on that? So the chair of the school committee gave us an update on where we're at with the state. And there was an article in the Daily News about Triton's outlook under the Student Opportunity Act to be a windfall. It is not a windfall in any way, shape, or form. I think Triton, if everything goes the way it's supposed to go, I think Triton may get an additional $67,000 out of the $1.6 billion that was approved for public education. The big things that came out of this that's gonna hopefully be beneficial to us is that there's gonna be a fix to the circuit breaker threshold, which will resolve the issue Triton Superintendent Brian Boyd raised at the state level that would have resulted in a net loss for this bill for Triton and many other students. And there's gonna be a 4-year phase-in of the special education transportation as an allowed cost for partial reimbursement through circuit breaker. There's a 3-year phase-in to bring charter school reimbursements to the full amount. There's gonna be a study by the Department of Revenue and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education of a municipality's ability for a town to pay. Calculation that's supposed to be put into place by March 20th. That may help us. There's a commission that will study rural and regional schools with low or declining enrollments, that's us, and make any recommendations on a number of specific items. That's something that I really wanna keep my eye on, because I argued this point to several different people at the state level that this is very important to us. It's not only us, it's the Cape and it's the western part of the state. So their report is due in December 2020, and her expectation is that most or all of the recommendation would have a potential impact on Triton if it was implemented. So, this is not a panacea to fix us at all, but the hope is that it lays the groundwork that there'll be commissions drawn together and some studies done to help it. But at least they do acknowledge and have acknowledged publicly that the system is broken and it's not gonna fix Triton.
So it's a step.
It's a step, but it's gonna be a process, and this is a 7-year phase-in too. So not everything will happen until 7 years.
I mean, it's the same old story that, you know, Lawrence and Havel and Irvin Center, they're
They
gonna
get
get
the money.
first.
Yeah.
Springfield's slated to get $93 million
Yeah.
additional.
And a lot of it is not
Seems to
only
go where all the
because
roads
of,
Oh, I wonder how that happens.
a lot of it, Alicia, is not because of their needs, but because of the, you know, the shape of the buildings. I mean, their
Well, they
infrastructure
do,
is
there
like-
is tremendous need. I mean, if you look in Lane and you look at all those big cities, there really is a need.
And they don't have the ability to, I mean, I always say when we're dumping sewage in the Merrimack River, you know, they're gonna have trouble fixing their school buildings, so.
Right.
So,
There's a lot of municipal infrastructure that's not right. But did you have something?
Yeah, the only, Jeff and I went to the Council of Aging's holiday luncheon, which was put on by
good food?
good food by Stabby Galley. It was just, Maggie did a top-notch job with the council. It was a great turnout. It was fun to go to.
All right, thanks for going to that. I really wanted to, but I couldn't make it that day.
I do wanna have a comment
Sure.
on this, cause I think it's important. There was a letter in the Daily News that was on the editorial page, it's an opinion page, on Tuesday, December 3rd. Praise for Newbury FinCom by resident Jim Moran, of Byfield. And I just wanna make it clear to the public that it's on the opinion page for a reason. It is an opinion, it's not fact. In the second paragraph, he says in Article 4, they being the Town of Newbury FinCom, Finance Committee, developed a behind-the-scenes master plan for the town hall. That's not true. There's no behind-the-scenes, anything done. The town Finance Committee has public posted meetings, everything is done, open, and, this insinuates that things are done in secret, in violation of the open meeting law, and it's not happening, so. There was also something he said here that, the approval of Article 4 is to renovate, repair the town hall. So, and I went back and I watched the town meeting, language, and the chair of the building committee, Bob Carnes, did get up and speak and said, I remember the way I voted. It was, when we were gonna put together a committee, it was not to renovate or repair the town hall, it was to look and give options. Do you remember that?
Options, yeah.
Look to give options to us, whether it's to renovate, repair, tear down, whatever the best use of taxpayer dollars to us. And so I just wanna make that clear, that, you know, that what you read in the paper isn't always fact,
Especially when it's on the opinion page.
especially on the opinion page. Thank you.
Okay, I keep with, Ellen was preparing this monster packet of information, I can't imagine there's been 8 minutes.
No.
That's what I thought, you've been busy. Okay, do we have any warrants?
If she can staple these things, I don't wanna
Yes.
arm
Motion to sign warrants.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I just want to second before we adjourn, and commend you for all the rigor in putting these together. It was hard to follow them, just reading them all, and so keeping track of it all, I commend you. So I just want to do that publicly.
And everyone should know,
pleasure.
everyone should know that's really something to see, to watch Ellen do a backflip and jump on the stapler to get it through all of this.
I mean, it's just, it's like, it's been heavy.
Yeah.
I wanted
All
to
right.
see that staple.
I mean, it was just, and it was difficult this time
Oh my
because
God,
it
there's a lot
was
of
new,
changes, a lot of
Yeah.
changes.
different.
Yeah,
That said, motion to
thanks for
adjourn.
everything you do.
Second.
Exactly.
All those in favor?
Uh,
Aye.